Alright, so welcome back. In this video we're going to take the spaceship that we've animated and we're going to learn to use the graph editor. So we can control the movements and how the animation goes in and out of the tangent. So if you need to, go ahead and grab the file that's underneath the video so that you could start with this or just use the previous lesson that you completed. So just remember where we were at. This is what we've done so far. We've keyframed the animation in and just allowed it to loop back to the other side and finish off where it began. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the graph editor now that we have keyframes, and the graph editor would be located under Windows, Animation Editor, and Graph Editor. And when you open this up, this is what it looks like. It works just like any other window, so you can use your normal Alt and zoom in and out. Normally I would hit F first, and that usually will bring all of the keyframes into focus in the window here. So let's take a quick look at this area here. And what we're looking at is a graph visualization of how the object is moving. So horizontally along here we're looking at the frames in the animation. So it starts at 1 and this yellow line represents your playhead. So if we move that, you can see it goes from frame 1 all the way to frame 300. On the left side we have vertical numbers. These represent the actual distances that the object is traveling. So as you can see here, if the line here is horizontal, that means there's no movement at all. And the more vertical the line is, the faster the movement is. So you can see here that we start off in the green line, which represents the translate Y. I'll go ahead and select it up here so you can just see that one. It starts off and it curves up, which means it starts out slower and then it speeds up as it gets to about here, and then it curves back into this keyframe here, so it slows down a little bit and then it stops and it starts back and it keeps going until it gets to the top here, and then it starts to come back down. So that's the Y movement. We also have a little bit of movement in the translate X. This is where it moves off to the right and then it comes back over to the left and then goes right again until it lands where it started. So that's what this represents. Now each of these little squares represents a tangent or a keyframe. And so it shows how the movement goes in and out of each keyframe location. Now these tangents have a default value. Let me zoom in on a couple of them. I'll click and drag across these two. I'll hit F to zoom in on them, and of course it looks like it spreads it out so you can see a little bit better how that line actually goes through each of those tangents. So right now when you see a curved line coming out, that means it's slowly speeding up as it comes out of that keyframe, and then this one it slowly changes and then speeds back up to come the other direction. We can change that, and the way you see it is, let's minimize that for a second, and as I play this animation you can see how there's a little bit of a slowdown and then a little bit of acceleration. So let's change this. I'll go back to the graph editor. I gotta select the spaceship here. And I'm going to focus just on the up and down, the y-axis. So let's say that we'll start with these front view pieces here. I'll hit F. And let's select one of these and do this button up here with the 45-degree angle. It's called a linear tangent. If I click on that, let me select the right one. Let me go to select translate Y, go linear tangent and click on it. It'll change the way the line exits that tangent. So it's coming straight out, which means there's no gradual acceleration. It's just going to come out right at the same speed that it's going to continue at. I can select the next one and do the same thing. And you can see it keeps a consistent speed all the way through to the other side, and then when it hits this, it just stops. So we could do one more here and then test to see what that looks like. So let's go back to the animation and play it. And let it come back around to the beginning again. And there you can see it's very sharp in those first few movements. So let's go back to the graph editor now. And let's go back and change this. So we have a number of different options up here. We can flatten it out. We can use the spline line, which is actually what the basic default setting is. But notice we also have these two handles on either side of the tangent. So if I click on this, I can hold my middle mouse button and rotate it to help kind of bend and change the way that tangent comes out. Now notice this one is set to linear, so even when I bend it, it bends the other side. So let's change this tangent. So I'll select the tangent. I'm going to go to flat, and now I've got a nice curve going on in there. So let's do that to this one as well. I'll go to a flat tangent. This one here, you can notice as you look at the line, it's kind of wobbly right there. So let's go ahead and grab it. I'm going to grab the handle and just move it so it's a little straighter going through that. Alright, so that's one of the ways you can adjust how that works. Another way is to break the actual handle. So right now this handle, when I move it, it moves the other side of the handle as well. So if we go up here to this button here with the white line and then going out with the red line, that's called break tangents. Go ahead and click on that, and now it allows us to work with each individual tangent or handle by itself, so it's no longer affecting the one on the other side. I'm going to undo that. Alright, so that's basically what we're doing with this, is we're using those tangents in the graph editor to kind of control the way this moves. Now a few other things here. As it moves up, it'd be good to create a little more looseness in the animation, a little more flexibility in terms of it floating, so it's not quite so mechanical looking. So let's go back and we'll adjust a few keyframes here and add some more keyframes to kind of help let it appear to be more of a floating object than something that's being picked up and moved around. So I'm going to go to the very beginning of the timeline again and bring up the move tool, and let's just scrub through, and when it gets to the top here, let's let it kind of go down just slightly. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and hit S to keyframe that in. So now we have kind of something like this, and then I'll bring it back up just slightly, and then it'll take off. Same thing when it comes into the next one. It comes in and it kind of slows down here. It does this kind of motion. Instead of having it just stay flat, because it's changing direction here, let's do this. Right before it takes off, let's have it rotate a little bit. So I'm going to hit E and go to rotate. And I'll just give it a slight rotation. And probably continue that rotation a little bit further past, so it's not staying. And then right before it changes direction, let's change the rotation again, start changing the rotation. And right as it starts to change direction, right at that 90 mark, we'll go ahead and give it a little further angle. That would give it the appearance of changing its momentum, or aiming its engines in a different direction to change that, that movement. And here it's going to come to a stop. So let's rotate it again right before it gets there. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that movement right there. So I'll keyframe it, and then over here I'll keyframe it going like this. And then by the time it gets to the area where it's stopped, we'll really have it banking. And I think in here we don't want it to just come to a dead stop. That's not very realistic. So let's give it just a little bit of a movement up and over, maybe something like this. And then we'll let it kind of settle back down. And bring the rotation around again too. Now right before it starts to drop, I'll leave it there. I kind of like that. So when it comes back around, it stops right here. Let's let it kind of go back up for a second. So it's not just a, and then we'll let it kind of float back down. Then it goes back up. So between here and here you'll notice it's moving. And maybe we just do a little wobble left to right as it's balancing itself in that spot. Then it takes back off, and next it's going to move to the right. So right before it does that, let's go ahead and get the movement starting to shift. If you need to delete a keyframe, you can use your keyframe, your playhead, and I would use these arrows over here. The arrows with the red line in front or in back will move the playhead to the next keyframe. So let's say I want to get rid of that, then right click on it and go to delete. So I'm just going to rotate this a little bit more as it starts to go back down, and let it slope down, and then we'll kind of guide it in. So I'm going to keyframe it there. Keyframe it there. And that's it. So go ahead and save that, and then so I'm going to turn off the move controller here. I'll just hit Q to go to select mode, and let's go ahead and just hit the play button and let it play through. And there you go. That's a pretty good example of how you can start to play around with your keyframes. You know, I would recommend getting the overall movement in there and then going back like we did and adjusting those frames. Then you can go back in the graph editor if you need to and adjust how those lines go in and out, so whether you want them to be smooth or sharp or however you want that to look. And that is all we've got for this particular video.